no one knows where Genghis Khan is buried.
No.
Genghis Khan, they did the wildest thing with him. They sent a pack of people to bury Genghis Khan. Then they sent another pack of people to kill the people everybody that went to Genghis Khan's funeral was murdered. They all got murdered by another group of people. And then those group of people got murdered by a separate group to make sure that no one had any understanding at all about where Genghis Khan was buried.
Oh my God. But it's got to be somewhere in Mongolia.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one knows.
Yeah. I
They could do LiDAR over the entire country and figure it out.
Well, there'll be somebody will proclaim that they found it at some point.
Maybe.
You know?
They have no idea.
So in contrast to Genghis Khan, Jesus is buried in Jerusalem, the very city where he's crucified. And he's buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Jewish council, which is an embarrassing idea because this is the council that condemned him to death.
Hello?
And so we have good reason to believe that it's true. And yet, so everybody knows where he's buried. And yet when they claim that he is risen from the dead, they don't go to the tomb to say, oh, look, here's your risen Messiah. He's still in the tomb. They don't do that because he's not there. The tomb is empty. And so what you have here, he brought in Occam's razor. What you have here is you either have one very logical explanation. He said this, it's more logical to believe otherwise. I don't think it's more logical. I think it's more logical to believe that Jesus was who he claimed to be, that this perfect Messiah who preached like no one had ever seen before, these values of self-sacrifice and loving your enemy, these things that we applaud today. I think the most logical thing is to say that guy is who he says he was, and then to say the very one simple explanation is all of this is explained by the fact that he actually rose from the dead, that he actually was who he claimed to be, versus Occam's razor. You have to give an explanation for how did the disciples have these experiences that convinced them that Jesus rose from the dead? Where did the body go? How were the Romans convinced that that the disciples had stolen the body when the disciples had no motive, means, or opportunity to do something like that? And the reason he calls it a conspiracy theory before is, why would you do that if your only motivation is to be essentially martyred for your faith? I mean, the disciples had nothing to gain by stealing the body of Christ. They faced persecution and death for believing that he rose from the dead. Yeah. So actually, it just complicates everything to believe that Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead.
What you're saying is looking at the historical data points that we do definitely know are the case. You have to string together more alternative theories to make sense of the historic record, right? Kind of the minimal facts, the 4 to 6 or 7, depending on who you talk to, minimal facts approach. But I think what he's talking about when he is talking about Occam's razor is not how to best make sense of those different historical data points. I think what he's talking about is that I think that Joe Rogan's worldview is still basically naturalistic. And so he's like, dude, even if there is some gap in the historical record, if my alternative is basically like a magical explanation, then it's Occam's razor simple in the sense that I don't believe in the supernatural, and I'm not going to include this supernatural element to the historical record if I don't believe in the supernatural, if I don't believe that there is anything supernatural to begin with. So I think from his perspective, he's like, that's totally off the table to begin with. That concept that Jesus actually rose from the dead, proved that he was a truth teller, and what he claimed about himself is that he and the Father are one, that he, is going to a place, I go to prepare a place for you, and in my Father's house are many mansions. Like, all of that is, I think, in the category in Joe's brain of fairy tale, fantasy, magic, nonsense. And so I think from that perspective, he's like, we have a problem here.
I get where he's coming from with that, but I do think, Richard Swinburne points out that when you're considering the probability of a particular event, you need to consider both the prior probability and the probability given evidence for the event. And so, for any random person, if they're gone from their grave, what's the most likely explanation? Well, they were taken from the grave by somebody else, or, some sort of accident happened or something like that. But for the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, the perfect teacher, the man who performed miracles, for that guy who claimed that he was going to die and rise again, what's the probability that that guy actually was who he claimed to be? Actually very high.